So welcome. Thank you everybody for attending today. I'm Laura Kennedy, lower school director. If I haven't had a chance to see you at carpool or at afternoon dismissal, wave at you from a distance. So today, as I mentioned, we're using the webinar format. So today's format is I've invited our new academic learning specialist, Dr. Kristin Withey, to speak. Then I have a short video to show you of something some of my student council kids put together, and then we'll have time for question and answer. So we're going to start with Dr. Kristin Withey. I hope you had a chance to read her blog on Friday about some of her very positive first impressions of her time here at the Meadows, as well as an explanation of how her program will function. Since Dr. Withey works with such a wide variety of learners, kindergarten to 5, I've asked her to speak today about something that's helpful for all students and parents to learn about, is a few tips about study skills. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Withey. Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. I'm excited to be here today. I am actually broadcasting from our nurse's office. I'm not in my learning lab, as we've come to call the classroom where we are working with students. So I'm very excited to share with you today about some study skills, or a little bit of the cognitive science behind why we do homework, and then how to support your students in those academic skills that they bring home. So I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit of a PowerPoint with you. Please bear with me as I make the transition, just sharing my screen. There we go. You should now be able to see study skills. So I always like to start a presentation with a cute quote or something that catches the attention. This one comes from Thomas Edison. And while we know that inspiration is key to learning and motivation, we also know that learning does require quite a bit of that active energy. So when we think more to the brain science, the cognitive science of learning, the way that the brain works and learns is that it's constantly trying to build connections between different parts of the brain. It's building those neural connections. In early childhood, what we see is the more that we use those neural connections, in early childhood meaning elementary school, the more that we use the repetition of building that neural connection, the stronger it becomes. Those neural connections that we don't use are sheared, they're removed. That way we don't have any extra connections that take up space in our brain. Our brain is very smart and efficient, so we don't want to build those connections that we're not ever going to use. And then those that we do want to use, we need to use regularly and frequently to make sure they're really strong. So what we see is that working memory, or the part that we're focusing on right now, has very small capacity. So we want to move our learning from that working memory, where we're actively focusing on it, into our long-term memory and store it there instead. And we also know that in order to learn anything, motivation is required. We cannot just sit there and try to rote memorize something that is not interesting to us. There has to be a purpose for it. That way we can build those connections in our brain and more actively recall that learning. So what that means for us is how the brain learns best. Knowing that our working memory is very small, we want to avoid cramming too much at once. So we don't want to have a huge sit-down session where we study for our entire math course in one night. Instead, we want to make sure that we're touching it frequently throughout the week, a little bit every day. So we call that distributed sessions. We want to touch it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in preparation for our test on Thursday, rather than just opening the book Wednesday night. We also know that in order to build those neural connections, we want to make sure that we're not working when we're very tired. So avoid working really early in the morning or really, really late at night. You do need to be actively awake and engaged and involved. And sleeping affects our memory as well. First, we don't really understand the full science behind sleep, but what we do know is it allows us to turn off our brain and then move what we have in our active memory more into the long-term memory. Somehow it helps the data upload and shift over into the other way that we want to keep it housed. So sleep is really, really important. While we might think that cramming the night before a math test is better than not studying at all, sleep is actually the most important part. When we think about how to study, it's really best to retrieve the information and apply it rather than just repeat copying notes. So if a kiddo comes home with a list of notes in their backpack to study rather than just recopying and recopying and recopying. Instead, you want to sit them down and ask them to explain the material to you, or you want to try to have them apply it to new learning. So if they have been working on fractions and they have tons of notes about fractions, instead of just having them recopy those notes about fractions, maybe you can order a pizza and say, how could we reapply this so that all of us gets an equal amount of this pizza? Or you could ask them to bake a brownie at night and work on the measuring cups and how much of a fraction of the different ingredients they need to be putting into the bowl, and then how can they divide all the brownies so that everybody gets an equal share. Application is the best way to really make sure that content is known rather than just repeat copying notes that may not mean much to us. Again, we also want to make sure that there is meaning. We can't just have something that's not meaningful to us. We want to instead connect our learning to prior learning, something that we already know or something that we've experienced. So again, if a child is really struggling to understand their math content, they're focusing on ratios, or they're focusing on adding up really, really big decimals, instead of just working through the basic formula that we would expect them to, maybe instead have them calculate with money, apply to something that they see on Amazon that they really, really want to purchase, but they don't know if they have enough money for yet. Or have them recall when they went fishing with their grandpa and they had to make some sort of smelly bait using certain ratios of fish or whatever it might have been. So connecting to prior experiences is really huge to make it meaningful. That way it's not just staying in our working memory and we lose it the next day, but instead our brain is able to build that neural connection so that it can be recalled. That being said, there is a point to memorization. The best things for us to memorize are those basic math facts, basic addition facts, basic multiplication facts, and sight words. So those words that we see that make up about 70% of what we read, like as, the, are, the very short words that we see in everything that we read. That way we're not spending cognitive processing time working on those things that should just be recalled really quickly. Instead, we can move into really processing and spending energy on the things that are more difficult. So focusing on those quick, easy things that need to be accessed quickly and often is where we want to spend our time memorizing. Then thinking about what that means as we move specifically into the English language arts and reading or math. With ELA, we want to, one suggestion is that we want to avoid cognitive and creative effort at the same time. What that means is if your student comes home with, they have to write a paper, the first thing we want to do is let their creative juices flow. We want to let them just get all of their ideas out there on that piece of paper without pausing them to say, remember to capitalize, remember to put your punctuation in. You want to just let the creative juices run out of their brain, get that creative process fully finished, and then stop and switch over to the cognitive process of editing. Okay, let's make sure you've got the capitals. Let's make sure you've got the periods. Let's make sure your paragraph is formed with a start and an end. So those are two separate processes. And if you stop the creative process in the midst of the juices flowing, sometimes it can make it really hard to get back into writing. So don't try to intermix the two. When we have them read and they're working on comprehension, it's really important that after they read a component, you ask why, or have them write down the main idea of what they've read. So we're not just reading to build fluency and make them sound very clear as they run through their book. Instead, we want to make sure that they're also comprehending what they're reading by asking those really important questions like why, or what was the author saying there. If we think about what we want to do when we're studying some of those skills or memorization, we can use mnemonics. All of us know Roy G. Biv growing up. So those are the colors of the rainbow. Or we can associate a really difficult process like the photosynthesis process with walking through our house, something that we know really, really well, but we can associate that the oxygen comes, or the whatever, the sunshine comes into the plant as I walk into my front room of my house. Then as I walk into the kitchen, the next phase of the process happens. So connecting it with something that we already know and we can move through our house in our brain will help us associate hard processes. When we think about building reading skills, it's really important that we make it playful, make it fun, add that motivation in there. So if your child is working on memorizing letters, you could have them break out some wiki sticks that are like yarn with wax covered, and have them build in the wiki sticks their new words. Or you can get a game, and rather than playing, Monopoly, even though Monopoly has great math skills, if you're working on reading, you could have a reading game that night instead. Another strong strategy to help your child at home is to model literacy. So show them that you're writing down your shopping list. Show them that you keep a journal. Show them that you enjoy reading before bed at night. Or do it together. Build the shopping list together. Engage in nightly reading before bedtime. Write a journal together or sit side by side, both journaling. When we think about how to support math learning, again, we see the idea that we want to make sure that we're applying what we've learned. So not just moving through the formulas, but instead, why in the world will I need this? How can I use it in my everyday life? It's really important too that we learn the vocabulary. So we don't just say, what's the number on top? What's the number on bottom? When we're talking about fractions, but that we use the vocabulary and call them the appropriate terms, because they'll hear those terms as they move forward into high school and beyond. So establishing that language of math is going to really support their learning moving forward. If a child is struggling to understand a formula, use those concrete materials. Get out little tiny teddy bears and move them across the page. Get out little pieces of paper and have them play with them, move them. We know until about age 8 or 9, kids are still in this concrete formulaic learning stage. So having something hands-on is really the most developmentally appropriate for them. As they're working through their math homework, have them share their thought processes with why they did what they did. You can even share your thought process as you move through approaching the math problem in a different way. Talking about math and sharing your ideas helps really build the true number sense and understanding. We want to work on some of the more basic skills as well. So the idea of subitizing, being able to look at a set of items and being able to say, oh, this is 20, without having to sit there and count each one is really important. We also want to do some number play, some rearranging. So when you see what is 23 times 15, how can we rearrange that in our head to say, oh, 23 times 10, I know that really easily. And then I can multiply it by another 5. And that will get me the same answer rather than being this overwhelming math problem. Again, we see the idea that we do want to memorize the basic facts because we want to spend our cognitive processing speed and space on the more difficult parts. And then we want to make sure, last but not least, that we're demonstrating the relevance in our daily life. So engage them anytime that you wind up having to measure because you want to buy wallpaper, or counting out because you know you want to go buy your next dog leash. So we have a ton of study tips and tricks and resources and games and ways to make learning more relevant here for you. And I know that Ms. Friedman in the library always has links and connections on her website as well. So we will make this available for all of you. And I do want to stop screen sharing now and open up if there are any questions.
So thank you, Kristin. And as you can see, Kristin's going to be a great resource for a variety of learners, working with a variety and a resource for parents as well. So if there's any questions, I'm not seeing any come in right now. Okay. Okay, we'll see if anything comes up a little later because Kristin, I think you're going to stay with us. But now I'm going to take a minute to just share a short video that the Student Council, I have started a 5th grade Student Council this year, which has been really interesting and challenging because a lot of the ideas I thought I might be able to do with them, I can't, but they've been coming up with some great ideas, which is great. So they wanted to, I was talking about how parents don't really know all the great things that are happening here. And they suggested doing a little news show. So we didn't quite get to the news show yet, but we did get a video put together. So I'm going to be sharing my screen and just show you a little 3-minute video of life in the lower school. We did just have a question about the list at the end of the presentation. Yes, that will be made available as a separate link. We're going to send this presentation out and the list of resources will be sent out as well. So, okay, here we go. Life in the lower school.
Hi, parents. And here's the day in the life as a lower school student at the Meadows School. Let's go. When you walk in, you are greeted with the birthday wall. This is all the birthdays for this week. Happy birthday to these people. Now it's time to do our daily temperature check. Let's go. Yay! As a reminder, when we walk in, we see the monthly theme of good citizenship. This month's theme is sportsmanship. As a little twist of the mind, we have a weekly challenge. Every week there is a new topic put up, and students fill out what they think the answer is on this sheet of paper. This week's clue is, this famous musician was born in New Orleans. He is known for having a rich, gravelly voice. When students think that they have the answer, they write it and put it in this slot. Last week's answer was Pablo Picasso. And here are last week's winners. As you walk to class, there are frequent hand sanitizers that you can use to keep your hands clean. New hand washing stations have been installed around campus. As we walk outside, you'll see that each class has their phones on to keep them safe. And as you can also see, you can see that everyone on the field and playground wearing their masks to keep them safe and healthy. We have a beautiful outdoor tent, which classes frequently use for outdoor eating. This beautiful outdoor tent is also used for music, Meadow singers, and recorder playing. This is our music teacher and Meadow singers teacher. Lunch is a little different this year. We get it delivered to our classrooms. Great American Pride is a task every 5th grader has to do every year. If they finish the tasks by the due date, they will be honored by Mayor Goodman and the City Council. The fifth graders have to accomplish these tests: the Pledge of Allegiance, the National Anthem, the Preamble to the Constitution, the President's in order, the United States and capitals in alphabetical order, and the Gettysburg Address. Are examples of amazing students' artwork, writing, and creativity. As you can see, students are happy and thriving here at the Meadows.
So we had some grand ambitions to be in classrooms a little more and show the classrooms as well, but then we realized we are now keeping classrooms and cohorts apart, so we could not do that. But hopefully you enjoyed seeing a little bit of what life looks like. It looks great. I'm continue to be so impressed by how polite, hardworking, and motivated all of the kids are. I very much enjoyed getting to know them. I've been out at recess playing kickball. I've been subbing a lot. I've been teaching art classes. I've been doing some reading groups, reading to classes. I haven't quite realized my goal of knowing all their names by now, but I'm getting much closer every day. So Kristin, I do have a question for you before I get to announcements. Do you have a suggestion for memorizing basic facts besides worksheets and flashcards?
So unfortunately, with memorization, I think that is the only thing that we have to do is memorize. When we think about learning math, most everything else that we do is using those memorized facts and then applying them in different ways. And then that application can be in games or can be applied to real life problems. But when we think about just the facts, that is the one part that we have to sit down and just memorize. There are some online references that I put at the end of my PowerPoint that can make it more playful. And then there are also, math games that incorporate the idea of like a flashcard, but memorization is still memorization.
Right, but to your point of some of the online games, and depending on your child's age, screen time might be an issue, but certainly a lot of those games where they have to pop something or get points for things certainly motivate. Dice games as well is a great thing as well. So thank you. Okay, just a couple of announcements. Grandparents' Day will not be held as usual this year. However, the advancement department has assured me they are putting together gifts for all grandparents, and that will be accompanied by a video highlight reel, which will be a little more professional than the video that I just put together with the kids of life in the lower school this fall. So that'll be going out about the same time as Grandparents' Day. We're also putting together a Zoom kindergarten event to replace the traditional party. And Casey Sage from the Parents Association is working on this to make it a fun Zoom event so that kindergarten families can connect. So are there any more questions for either of us? There's only been a couple of questions in the chat right here. Questions, suggestions? Okay. Okay, I'm happy to hear suggestions for future parent coffees. This format is unusual, to say the least, and like nothing I've seen, but I like to do things to help parents and to help what's happening in the curriculum and in the school, but also as parents. So sometimes I like to share books and snippets of things that I've read lately. So if you have any suggestions for anything like that, like as one of the parents just asked about the memorization facts. When is Grandparents' Day? A question asked. So that is typically the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but this year we have an in-service that day, so we don't have it. So I believe the things will be mailed home to the grandparents sometime that week. But I know they're also working on the video, so I think it depends when the video exactly gets finished as well. But thanks for that question. Okay, so somebody suggested they like to see what we see, and I will try to do more of that. Do parents have a perspective on the maximum screen time for kids?
So the APA has come out with suggested amounts of screen time. So if you look at the Association for Pediatrics, I think up until about the age 8, half hour is what they recommend for kiddos to be on screen time. And that includes cell phones, iPads, computers, and television all wrapped into that half hour. But for a better, more comprehensive list, do go to the APA website.
And from my understanding too, Kristin, they do designate between screen time that's focused on schoolwork, for example, like a seesaw activity versus a game. So there is that to be thrown into the mix today too, because so much of what screen time is happening, especially for our kids, and certainly if you're remote, is unprecedented and is a lot of learning time as well. So that seems to be changing quite a bit. Okay, well, I'm really enjoying the Meadows. And so please keep everything. Oh, the parent didn't like our comment of a half an hour of screen time, which I think all of us this year, it's unprecedented, right? So, I can't imagine any parent is sticking to a half an hour right now. But the biggest thing is to take breaks. That's what I keep reading, is that we need breaks. So whether you're remote or whether your child's working at home on a project or playing, it's not good for them to be all the time. So our kids who were remote this last 2 weeks, third grade, that's one of the big things the teacher said. They kept telling them to take breaks, get away from the screen, turn it off, do your work, come back. So, okay, thank you, parents. Thank you for everything. And I look forward to seeing you out at Carpool and getting to know your awesome kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay in touch and send emails with more questions.
Thank you.